Hey everybody, welcome to Commercial Construction Elevate the Industry podcast series hosted by yours truly, Dave Presida. Thanks for being here. The purpose of the podcast is to help everyone in commercial construction, from owner to intern, understand the business better so that you can make the best decisions about where you want to go and how you're going to get there. Now, there's two ways to do that. One is I'm going to share my personal experiences over the last 40 years. And the second is we're going to introduce you to industry leaders whose stories are powerful and influential. They certainly affected me, and possibly they will affect you. Today, I'm happy to have as our guest Brian Turmail. He's the Vice President of Public Affairs and Strategic Initiatives for the Associated General Contractors of America. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Dave, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome.
I feel a lot of pressure now. You said I've got to be inspiring, but let's see what we can do.
I'm sure you will be. Let's talk about AGC, when it started, who it is. Just give us some background.
Sure. So the Associated General Contractors of America, we're a commercial construction trade association. We were started in November of 1918, so we're a little over 100 years old. We celebrated our centennial back in. Oh, thank you. I'm glad it's done. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but back in 2018, and the way it started actually, for those of you who are fans of history, during World War I, many different parts of the economy essentially got backed up as the country mobilized for the first war effort. And there were a lot of problems in the building of these, they call them cantonments, or large military bases used to train all the soldiers during war, the doughboys for World War I. And at the end of the war, there was kind of this appreciation of the business community that they needed to sort of pull together and unite so they could all advocate or sort of work on common interests. And actually, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce organized a construction-focused meeting in Atlantic City in 1918. And there were a bunch of general contractors in the room, and they looked around, and pretty quickly they realized, wait a second, this meeting's being run by a bunch of subcontractors. We're out of here. And so they left, and they went to Chicago, and they created, a few months later, what became the Associated General Contractors of America in, again, November of 1918. And as a trade association, so we, like I said, we represent the commercial construction community. So our members build everything except for single family houses. So anything that requires a hard hat. Power plants, highways, bridges, airports, ports, office buildings, strip malls, hotels. Even, they're not building like the meandering muse housing developments, but they're building the roads and putting the pipelines in that serve those communities. And they're building the strip mall outside with the grocery store and the pizza place. So, as a trade association, we have 3.5 things that we do on behalf that our members pay us to do. The main three are we advocate, we educate, and we connect. And the other half one is we also save our members a heck of a lot of money, which we'll get to in a second. But so on the advocacy side, we're paid to advocate on behalf of the interest of the construction community in Washington, right? So and that's everything from traditional old school, brown shoe lobbying, walking up and down when you could, the halls of Congress, making sure that legislators are passing measures that are in the interest of the industry, and blocking the stupid stuff that's going to make it harder for folks to build things, to employ workers, or to be successful in their business. But we also do a lot of regulatory advocacy. The more political gridlock we've got in this town, the more decisions are actually getting made by bureaucrats and executive office or executive branch officials who are writing regulations.
True lobbyists.
Oh my gosh, so I mean, I guess, nature abhors a void or a vacuum a void. And since Congress isn't passing laws, the executive branch just goes ahead and starts writing them in the form of regulations.
So we are going to get into the political aspect of it. But
okay.
If we back up a little bit,
yeah.
Your mission is you advocate for all commercial construction.
That's right.
How would you say?
Well, we are big believers in the fact that the foundation for America's economic success, for our quality of life, and for our national defense is commercial construction. You can't have anything else in this country before you build it. You can't have a greener future. You can't have strong military facilities. You can't have a thriving economy. You can't even have nice parks and recreation facilities if you don't build it first. So the construction industry is the backbone of everything we take for granted in this country. So our job is to advocate for measures that will help that industry succeed and to protect them from measures that will harm them in the work they do as the foundation for our economy.
Like poor legislation.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, plenty of poor legislation. And in fairness, I don't want to sound like a naive optimist, But our general belief is that most poor legislation isn't done out of spite. It isn't done because people don't want construction industry to succeed. It's just that most people don't understand how our industry works, right? I mean, it's a lot more complicated than just I saw a dozer, I saw a piece of yellow equipment outside my window. I think I know construction. So our job, 90% of the time, is really just to educate members of Congress and federal and executive branch officials on how the industry works and what can actually help them and what can actually hurt them. And that solves not all, but most of our problems.
So you're a trade organization. I love it that you're commercial construction because that's what we are. What makes you different than ABC and ASA and all the other acronyms out there? And they're all good, but what makes you different?
You're right. They're great organizations, and we have strong working relationships with all of them. We're the only trade association that represents the entire commercial construction industry. We represent general contractors, we're the largest subcontractor association in the nation. We represent open shop. We represent union shop. We represent, again, every type of commercial construction except for single family housing. There's no other association that represents the entire commercial construction industry. So if it's an issue that affects construction, we're on it. And frankly, as a communications guy, that makes my job a little bit more challenging because it's not, I just can't boil it down to here's 1, 2, and 3 things we stand for. If it's construction related, we're on it, which means that we actually have to be a mile wide and a mile deep on an enormous range of issues.
And see, I learned a lot by researching you guys because Associated General Contractors, okay, it's a bunch of general contractors, but how many members do you have?
We have 27,000 member firms. So companies join AGC,
Sure.
And then we serve all of their employees from CEO all the way down to laborer. So 27,000 firms belong to AGC. About 7,000 of them are general contractors.
So
about
20,000 are other.
Yeah, you've got about 11,000 subcontractors or specialty contractors, and the rest are law firms, insurance firms, bonding agencies, all equipment suppliers,
All part of the industry.
everything that feeds into the industry. And the way we're structured nationally, so you've got AGC of America, we're the national association. We have 89 chapters around the country. Some cover an entire state, a couple cover multiple states, some are municipal chapters. So we've got like a San Antonio chapter,
A DC chapter.
a DC chapter, a Philly chapter, a Pittsburgh chapter. And if you think about it at its most local level, if I'm a subcontractor, if I'm the insurance broker, right? I want to belong to that local AGC chapter because I want to be in the room when they're doing the skeet shoot or outside at the facility where they're doing the skeet shoot. I want to be at the reception. I want to be in the planning meetings because it's in my interest to get to know and have working relationships with everyone that I'm going to be doing business with. So that's why we're such a sort of diverse industry. And even though we started, our origins are a bunch of general contractors who said, wait, we want to be in charge of just general contractors. We've evolved into the industry's voice.
So you're different because you're the only organization that you have the entire commercial construction industry. How are you built? You have a board, right?
We have a board of directors. At the largest sense, we have a board of governors. If you think about it, it's the best way to put it. The board of governors would almost be like the House of Representatives in the sense that they are the largest body that governs AGC of America. They meet on essentially an annual basis, and they're kind of the first point of course correction. They want to make sure we're heading in the right direction. And then the more nuanced management of AGC comes through our board of directors, who meet on a quarterly basis. And they're the ones that are charged with kind of making sure, giving us the strategic direction we need to have. And then more specifically, we have our management committee, the sort of 4 executive officers of our association, our president, our senior vice president, our vice president, our treasurer. They're the day-to-day bosses that my boss reports to. My boss, CEO Steve Sander, reports to the management committee. They're the ones who they hire Steve, they make sure he's doing a good job, and then Steve makes sure they know what we're doing and that they're comfortable with the direction we're heading.
How is the staff, the actual hands-on paid staff?
We have about 65 staff nationally. So most of us work out of the Arlington, Virginia office. Then we have a townhouse on Capitol Hill where our lobbyists work. Unlike a lot of associations, we employ our own lobbyists. We don't contract that out. So we've got a team of about a half dozen lobbyists who, I'm biased, but I think they're the best in the business.
Sure.
And they do a wonderful job on behalf of our industry. And that townhouse is a nice amenity in normal years, not like coronavirus years. The townhouse is there for members who are coming in to, when our members come in to meet with their members of Congress. The townhouse is a place where they can leave their bags, relax, make some phone calls, get a lunch. During normal inaugurations, that's where we'd have the open house. If we do a fly-in, then we set up a tent in the yard of the townhouse, and we have a couple beers at the end of the day. And it's kind of it's almost like a clubhouse for our members on Capitol Hill.
It'll be back.
But it's an unusual year in many respects.
Unbelievable. Well, look, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into what the member benefits are. Hi, I'm Patrick Ripple, founding partner of ISA Architectural. I've known that chap right there for well over 20 years.
And what a 20 years it's been. I'm Larry Windsor, partner, vice president of construction services. Our third partner, Mike Morehouse, can't be with us today.
We are the Mid-Atlantic's premier sales force for architectural building products and engineered architectural solutions. For over 15 years, we have been providing comprehensive design solutions to architects and designers all across this region, and high-quality economic product solutions to contractors and subcontractors too.
We bring products and people together. We specialize in the building envelope, everything from the weather barrier all the way out to different types of cladding. We fully understand the rain screen principle, and we have an interior portfolio specializing in wood and metal walls and ceilings.
If you're a developer, part of a design team, architect, or interiors, or if you're a contractor, let us help you.
Visit www.isaarchitectural.com and see how we can bring value to your project.
Welcome back. We're going to get into some member benefits, and you touched on a few already, but we're going to dig a little deeper. Advocacy being one. Tell the audience how you advocate for the whole group.
Sure, and maybe I'll use an example. We were just kind of talking about this during the break, but our members pay us to represent their interests in Washington and frankly around the country. So in 2020, early 2020, as the pandemic's hitting, and mayors and governors are shutting down parts of their economy left and right, we mobilized. We went to federal officials and actually had already relationship with a then little known agency called the Department of Homeland Security Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA. And we went to CISA and we made the case successfully that construction was an essential industry, and so should be included in CISA's list of essential industries. And the case was twofold. One, that so much of the economy is dependent on construction, and two, that this is an industry that's had a long history of successfully following complicated safety regulations. So our point was, look, tell us what we need to do, right? And that we'll continue building hospitals, infrastructure, everything else the economy needs, because we're the foundation of the economy. So they put construction on, they updated their list, and they added construction to the list. And that list went to every governor, every mayor, every county official around the country. And most, fairness, not all, but most of them followed that federal guidance and identified construction as essential. And that made the difference between success and failure for most of our member firms last year. They kept building.
To everybody's listening, that is huge. And I had no idea, because we're essential. I'm like, what? We're essential? And I'm building major projects in the DC market. You mentioned a word, though, safety. Because you've been around so long and you've been able to navigate through difficult situations before, they trusted you, right, to provide the right guidelines, which filtered down to contractors, right? Just things as simple as this stairwell during construction is up only. This stairwell is down only. A number of things, but well, thank you for that.
Well, it's because it wasn't me, it was our team, but we had good working relationship with OSHA that we've built for years with all the career guys, right? We've been doing memorandums of understanding with them for years. We're on their committees so that we could have them go into the Department of Homeland Security officials and say, when they say they can follow safety rules, they know what they're talking about. So that's how we advocate. It's a tangible example of how we advocate for members. Another good example, at least in our surveys, about 80% of our members took what's known as a Paycheck Protection Program loan, PPP loan, which is one of these federal sort of, safety, sort of relief measures they passed. But when the Small Business Administration first came out with its guidelines on who qualifies for a PPP loan. They did it based on dollar volume, not employee size, which was not what Congress intended. The problem is a lot of construction firms, even small ones, they may employ 50 people, but they do an awful lot of dollar volume with work because construction is expensive, right?
Heavy material.
So it would have eliminated an enormous number of our members if they had stuck with that original guidance. So we went into the SBA and said, you're not following what Congress told you to do. We will sue you if you don't fix this guidance right away. And as we're walking out of the office, they fixed the guidance. So we got, so they did it just on employee number size. And then we kept having to go back in with the Small Business Administration and make sure they didn't undermine what also ended up being one of the most successful relief programs of the coronavirus. And we're still fighting with them over forgiveness of those loans.
It couldn't be more relevant, right? A good friend of mine who gets involved with sales and acquisitions for me. He's got a business services group. They do, tax accounting and all that kind of stuff, like KPMG. Anyway, just the other day, he was telling me about the fact, because I told him I was going to interview you, and he goes, hey, talk about PPP, because he represents several companies that have the PPP loan. Some have been forgiven. Some are trying to go back again. He did say that you threatened to sue SBA. It's unbelievable.
In fact, we have a suit against them open right now over their questionnaire. The questionnaire is every firm that received a loan, it now received a questionnaire so that they could justify why their loan should be given. The problem is that when Congress passed the law, the rule was if you are facing at the moment you need the loan economic uncertainty, then you qualify. Period. Nothing else. Just you qualify. Not if you are facing economic uncertainty and end up having a good year, you don't qualify. They didn't say that. They said if you're facing economic uncertainty, you qualify. And we went back and actually pulled every article about the state of the economy in March and April. Made a packet, sent it to every one of our members, and said, in case anyone asked you what your state of mind was, here's the 1,000 articles about how we were facing economic Sodom and Gomorrah back in March and April. There wasn't a business in America that wasn't facing economic uncertainty back then. But now the SBA wants to rewrite history and is sent around a questionnaire saying, how did the rest of your year go? Implying that they're going to base their forgiveness decision not on what Congress said, qualified state of mind when you took the loan, but how you did after you got the loan, which is unlawful. Hence, we've got a lawsuit against them, and we're getting them to fix it. They're just not moving as fast as we need them to move.
Is this Congress-driven?
No, in fact, Congress did the right thing. They wrote a good piece of legislation when it comes to the Paycheck Protection Program. And every time we've asked them to weigh in to fix what SBA, the Small Business Administration, has done wrong, they've acted. So Democrats and Republicans alike value this program and wrote good laws. It's that the executive branch, under the last president, Trump, for whatever reason, was their own worst enemy in implementing it. I think that what happens, and this is not unusual to the coronavirus, is that there's a core of career government officials who are dedicated, good people, but have always done something one way. When you have emergency legislation like you saw last year, and it asks them to do something the other way, they just can't pivot that fast. They got to go back to mama and always do what they've always done. And so we're just trying to help them understand that.
Well, you're providing them, right, with the reasons.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Why you should be doing this.
And the thing is, we're providing them, and the best thing is that we've had, look, the coronavirus has been awful. No one wants to see a coronavirus. But in terms of its impact on how many of our members and how frequently our members are engaged in the work we do, we've seen engagement levels that we've never seen before, probably since the Second World War, right? I mean, we have dozens upon dozens upon dozens of members who are willing to get on Zoom or Teams, or they'd be willing to get on a plane and come to Washington and explain to the SBA exactly how they're messing things up. So it's been a lot easier for us to advocate for our members because they're engaged with us and they're calling up their own member of Congress and saying, look, Chuck Schumer, you got to fix this for me. And that's one of the reasons we've been so successful during this crazy year is because our members have been engaged, and we're lucky for that.
And I said this earlier, that coronavirus is so bad in so many ways, but transformative in others. We're changing, right? I mean, I'm consulting for 3 major companies right now, all of which have PPP loans. One's been forgiven, one has no idea where it's going, and one is, just trying to re-up for the second term. Yeah. Great that you advocate for that. So advocacy is good. What about education?
Yeah. So we do in a lot of formal education programming, really built at transitioning those sort of project manager, project supervisor folks and helping them accelerate their career up into the C-suite, right? So we don't do a lot of, we will end up, and we can talk about this in a bit if you want, but we don't do a ton of craft training. Some of our chapters do craft training, but we don't do a ton of craft training. But when you start getting to those folks who wear boots but khakis, that's how I like to describe it. There's some time in the trailer, sometimes on the job site, sometimes back in the office. We have a wide range of training programs to help them transition and advance their career.
So give me an example of what you would provide for PM, because like we said, this podcast is for everyone from owner to intern. We want people to move forward in the business.
So it's everything from, we have sort of, advanced supervisory training programs, advanced project manager programs. We have a building information modeling certification program. So you can actually come out of our program, and if you pass the test, I've never taken it, but they tell me it's rigorous, then you can have a BIM certificate. Sure. Speaking of the coronavirus accelerating trends, if you can model and map buildings in 3D and kind of eliminate all your oops moments before you get to construction, you're invaluable, right? Same thing with lean construction. We've got a lean construction education curriculum. You come out with your certificate if you pass the test at the end of that. So the idea is to make these kind of mid-career professionals even more valuable to their firms, and at the same time to drive innovation within the industry, right? Through these education programs. But beyond the kind of formal, I'm going to sign up and take 30 hours, 40 hours of class programs, so much of what we do in terms of our annual convention and our subject-specific meetings are designed to educate the industry about the latest trends. And one of the things we spend a lot of time thinking about and frankly worried about is that, all right, so as all this cool new technology comes on board, we've got a lot of large members, but we've also got a lot of medium and small size members. Now, our large members are wonderful in that they can kind of field test a lot of the technology, and they can figure out of these 10 gee whiz pieces of technology, 7 are junk, 2 are cool, and 1 is really helpful. But our smaller, medium-sized members, they don't have the time, resources, or staff to do all that R&D or do that on-site testing. So we can come in and work with our larger members and say, all right, of these 10 new pieces, this is great. These 2 are okay, but here are the pitfalls you need to know when implementing it. And these other 7, put them over.
So you in essence learn from some of the big guys, and that filters down to some of the smaller companies that don't have those resources.
A trade association is essentially a community, right? It's a community of like-minded people who are in the same profession, who are there to learn from and teach each other. And it's not just, they're not just doing it because they like to hang out together. They do, but they're also doing it because if I'm one of the big companies, if I'm Turner, if I'm Hensel Phelps, I can't build successful projects if I don't have successful partners or ourselves, right? And we visited, our chief economist and I, we were in Memphis, visited a Turner Hospital project a few years back. And basically what they told us is, look, we can't find subs and specialty contractors who keep up with us. So we're building this hospital the way we would have built a hospital 10 years ago. So that's why it's so important for the Turners and Hensel Phelps to help and be at the table teaching other firms. They're not teaching necessarily their competitors, they're teaching their partners. And you can do that through AGC of America because we're the place where everyone is at the table together. We have all kinds of affinity deals. For example, with General Motors, with Dell Computers. So if you're buying, contractors are going to be buying big white pickup trucks, right? That's part of the business. They can save money more than what they have to pay for dues just through our affinity programs. Awesome. When they're buying computers, they can save money. When they're buying gas, when they're doing their FedEx shipments, they can save money through our deal. So the membership pays for itself. Sorry, but the XG isn't good to know. Not the only reason. Probably the like I said, it's the half reason out of the other 3, but it's still an important value.
Awesome. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into Brian and his role and how he got here. See you in a minute. Hey, welcome back. So we're going to talk about this guy. He's obviously very effervescent. We love your energy. Tell us how you got to this job.
Oh, how did I get to this job? So my first job out of college, I swear this is real relevant. My first job out of college, I was actually was going to save the world. I was in this program called Teach for America, and I was a second grade teacher in Washington, D.C. And I learned a couple things about myself from that experience. First, I wasn't a particularly good teacher. Second, that I love Washington, D.C. Third, that I fell in love with another Teach for America person and married her and stayed in town. And then fourth, that I liked high energy jobs, right? The great thing about teaching is that you never once have a moment where you look up at the clock and think, it's only noon. Instead, you look at the clock and think, oh my gosh, it's noon. I just started teaching and I got 3 more hours to get all my lessons in. So, I've always kind of looked for high energy jobs. And I've been, since I married a local and moved to DC, I've been living in Washington and really work in this town without getting sucked into kind of the Washington government world. And after working for PR firms for a couple of years, ended up working for the federal government. First, I worked for the Transportation Security Administration, which is a little bit like working in dog years. Like 1 year at the Transportation Security Administration is like 7 years of normal work.
Much fun.
Especially when it first started. Oh, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. But from there, I moved over to the U.S. Department of Transportation. I ended up as a political appointee. This is during George W. Bush's administration. So it meant my ID tag had an expiration date on it, at the end of 2008. And
What year that was?
well, right, yeah, the economy fell apart. Just I was looking for a job, but one of the things obviously the Department of Transportation does is implement the Federal Highway Program, which is one of the single largest federal construction programs. So it's something that's very important to Associated General Contractors. And when my tenure at DOT was coming to an end, the guy who was the general counsel, a guy named DJ Griffin at DOT, had his first job in Washington with the guy who's now my boss, Steve Sander. Right? So he calls up Steve and says, are you looking for a PR person? Because we got one here. He's going to be out of work. And DJ was nice enough to say, I think he's pretty good. And Steve said, it's funny you mentioned that. Our current PR person is moving to Delaware. So, these things kind of work out this way. So I ended up interviewing and getting offered the job and moving over.
Was this in 08?
This is very end of 08. Yeah. So really the first thing I jumped into was the stimulus fight.
Wow.
So the economy had fallen apart. The new administration's coming in under President Obama. And there was sort of fight over the stimulus. And so sort of jumped right in working on explaining why there should be more infrastructure funding in the stimulus bill. Ultimately, we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got about $150 billion out of that package for infrastructure projects.
What do you think construction would have got without the influence of AGC?
Nothing. Everyone else had their hand at the table. Would have been all solar panel install. Not that it's not construction, but solar panel installation on homes.
Yeah.
A lot of state paybacks. But in many ways, the stimulus, even though it had money for no one's going to sniff their nose at $150 billion, there were things that they didn't anticipate or think about or fully think through with the stimulus that I think are lessons that can be applied as we get into coronavirus recovery. And one is that no one really thought about backfilling state and local construction budgets.
Yes.
So when they put all this infrastructure money in, it didn't go to build the next, Boulder Dam. It didn't go to build the next Golden Gate Bridge. It went to cover the enormous deficit that got blown into every state DOT's highway budget. So $150 billion didn't give us $150 billion of additional new work. It just saved $150 billion of work that would have been canceled. The problem is it's kind of hard to prove a negative, right? Yeah. It's hard to say that all this work wouldn't have happened. This repaving of I-95 or this already planned widening of I-10 by an extra lane in Metro Phoenix wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the stimulus. It's relevant because of who's president now, but I remember taking one of our members back in 2009, Pike Construction up in New Hampshire, to a panel that then Vice President Biden organized on stimulus job creators. And Pike had just had a job fair with like a news helicopter hovering over their offices. So people were lined up to get jobs at Pike, and they'd made jobs. They created jobs because of the stimulus. And so they're there to sort of show the media and explain to Vice President Biden how the stimulus has created jobs. Well, then Vice President Biden was talking about how great the stimulus is, but then on a kind of like a sort of self-induced error says, and of course we know there's going to be tons of corruption with the stimulus, but that's okay because it's helping the economy. Jeez. So, the entire message got stepped on by then Vice President Biden talking about, there's going to be corruption.
And that was the soundbite that was.
That was it. I told Christian Zimmerman from Pike, I said, that's going to be the news story tonight. So hopefully he's learned that lesson not to step on his own message this time. But one of the things that we're pushing for as we have this now current conversation about recovery is you got to backfill those state and local construction budgets.
Right.
Otherwise, any new money you put in is just going to cover what was already.
And I think the lesson, at least from some legislators, is it's better to go bigger than smaller, right?
I hope, yeah, that's what we're pushing for.
So you've been here since 08, 12, almost 13 years.
Yeah.
How are you different now than you were when you started?
Well,
other than having a lot of experience.
Well, I've got a lot more, and I didn't have gray hair when I started either, so I'm older. But I know a lot more about the industry. I knew about Washington. I knew about sort of the federal highway program when I got here. I didn't know as much about. I wouldn't have told you I didn't know what BIM was, lean construction was. I had no idea how a general contractor operated. I had no idea how a general project or even any kind of project was built. But I've been lucky in my job. I end up taking reporters to a lot of different construction sites as we talk about important issues. And I'm kind of a naturally curious guy. And what person doesn't enjoy getting their boots on, going to a construction site, poking around? And the members have been great about spending enormous amounts of time with me to help me understand what's happening. What am I seeing? What am I looking at? What's actually happening here? How does this fit into the bigger puzzle? And then you've probably seen this. There isn't a contractor in America who, when they have someone who doesn't know that much about the industry, doesn't want to say to you, hey, you want to go look at a couple other projects I've got?
I'm telling you,
So,
it's the easiest things to get people to talk about.
Oh my God. So we'll wrap up a news conference. And then, I remember I had a contractor in Sioux Falls take me to they were renovating the cathedral in Sioux Falls. And he wanted to show me the horsehair that they had behind the old plaster, because that's how they used to plaster walls.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Right.
So what do I know now that I don't? I have a better understanding of how the industry works, and I have a much greater appreciation for the work our members do and the risks they take. Ooh, you're only one bad project away from the people coming and collecting the furniture out of your house, right? And we see that. I mean, that's happened. It's not theoretical. So you get that we talk about our members build projects, but really they're in the business of managing risk, right? That's the difference between a successful construction firm. And, yes, you got to know how to get the rebar in. You got to know how to sort of build the floors or you build the bridge, but you really have to know how to manage the risk. And that's not something that I would have known coming out of government. And this is, to my point earlier, why we have to spend so much time educating elected and government officials about the industry, because people don't get that. And it took me 12 years to get, and frankly, I still have to learn. One of the things we're doing here is we do Construction 101 kind of lunch and learns for our staff, right? We know association world. We know how to run a good association. We know how to lobby. We know how to get people's names in the news, but we don't necessarily, we're not builders, right? I do now own a pair of steel tips, but, and the rest of the PPE. But, the more we know how our members work, the better we can serve them.
So now you're here. Let's talk about where the industry is going. Like, what are the main trends that you see today? And I'm going to start with what I'm going to give you one. Off-site construction.
Yeah. It's funny. Every time I call it a new trend, off-site construction, I'm reminded that it's not a new trend. For example, that, the three main original hotels at Disney World were off-site prefabricated hotels built by an Alcoa offshoot, if I recall right. So off-site construction isn't new. But what's new about off-site construction and what makes it, I think, so relevant today? Well, a couple reasons. One, of course, is technology, right? So, we did a charity project a few years back in San Antonio, donating construction to build the world's first ever fully handicap accessible water amusement park, right? Really cool. Actually, in a park facility owned by a retired home builder in the San Antonio area, bought an old quarry, and it's great facility. But we had all these off-site prefabricated sheds that were going to house the water pumping equipment, right? That we were going to put on. But the amusement park owner had some friends who could do the concrete pour. So they poured out the pads, right? All our guys had to do was put these prefabricated sheds on the pads. But not one of the pads fit the sheds or vice versa, right? So it took twice as long to get Jimmy rig everything onto the pad. Yeah, so, but done right and done unified, technology makes it so much easier to eliminate those kinds of oops moments when you're doing offsite prefabrication. Add to that, and not that workforce shortages are a new issue, but they're an ever more realistic issue. And I was in members' offices outside of Harrisonburg in the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, plumbing contractor, right? And you're in their warehouse, and they just have racks and racks and racks pre-assembled urinal stands.
Yes.
And they said, yeah, we don't even know if people are going to where these are going to go because we haven't been contracted to use them. It's just with our manpower or person power issues, it just makes more sense to pre-assemble these here, and then we can send them on the rack, on a real metal rack. The metal rack stays inside the wall, but it's just that much easier than trying to get 10 people, send them to Richmond, have them spend 3 days assembling this stuff on site. This is how they manage their workforce.
You said it, technology. I'll give you an example. I consult for a company that does infill exterior wall panels. Now, these, instead of stick framing, because the manpower, lean building practices, schedule. If you can build these off-site successfully, put them on site, tilt them up, put them in place with the deflection build. And the only way you can do that is because you have a laser scan, a point cloud laser scan that tells our engineer who programs our frame CAD machine, which makes the lengths, and they vary because concrete has a tolerance. You couldn't do that 10 years ago.
That's right.
But you can do it now.
Oh, yeah.
And the manpower shortage is not getting any better.
No, that's absolutely right. So, and the other thing is, if you're trying to recruit, as much as there's a segment of the industry that the main appeal is, I don't want to be stuck in a fluorescent lit office. I want to be outside. I want to be in the open. There are many parts of the country where there's an appeal to working in a climate controlled environment. It's cold in the winter. It's hot in the summer. I mean, the guys in Phoenix are hydrating on Saturday for a project on Tuesday. I mean,
there's no snow days. There's,
it can be hot, but so you can have a lot more of a controlled environment if you're offsite prefabricated. Again, the technology makes it a more reasonable proposition. To go back to those Disney hotels, they put in all these sort of prefabricated rooms, and then had to immediately, I think, pull them out because they had so much mold that went inside because they had anticipated the impact of humidity on those sort of now kind of closed-in spaces.
So that was kind of mine. You tell me what other trends you see.
Well, related to offsite prefabrication, and the architects hate it when we talk about this, but we do see on the building side kind of an end to the notion of bespoke buildings, that every building is going to be custom designed by an architect and is going to be a unique piece of work. Because you have so many components of buildings now being offsite prefabricated, in the end, it's going to be more like I go to General Motors website and I buy Silverado pickup truck, and I'm going to pick which custom add-ons I want to put to which options I want on it. That's what building a building is going to be for not every, but most projects. Most projects, if you're building a suburban office park, or if you're building, a warehouse facility, you don't need sort of a design statement. That's going to be for few and far between buildings. So that's going to hopefully streamline the process. I think
I can see why the architects are.
They don't like that at all. No, it's blasphemy. But it's basic. But the other thing, we're looking at consolidation. The bigs will keep getting bigger, and then the specialty contractors will keep getting more specialized. But as an industry or as an association that represents the entire industry, we want to make sure that there's still. I mean, the construction industry is one of the last industries where there's so many family-run businesses, right? It's not dominated by like an Amazon, a Facebook, an Apple, and a Google.
Right.
And there's a lot that makes this industry special because it's so diverse and there's so many firms involved and competing with each other. So we want to make sure that obviously some consolidation is going to happen. We've seen that accelerate again with the coronavirus, but we want to make sure that there is a robust and a competitive market out there, and that there are many different people. Diversity. You can't talk about the workforce in the United States in construction without talking about diversity and inclusion. The fact that, here's the good news, that as long as we've been talking about workforce shortages, the fact is that we are fighting workforce shortages in this industry with one hand tied behind our back, right? African Americans make up 12% of the U.S. workforce, but only 6% of the construction workforce. Women make up 51% of the U.S. workforce, but only 9% of the construction workforce, and only 3% of the craft workforce. There's a lot of room for workforce development growth. If we can do a better job as an industry, bringing in communities that we've never been successful in recruiting before, which is easier said than done.
I'll tell you hit a chord. Because in the last several years, I've been working with group, nonprofit out of Baltimore called Open Door America. And the idea, and they're good at it, but they're small and we're trying to get funding. The idea is they screen potential candidates, right? Because what do we have? We have a work shortage. What do we need? Manpower, womanpower, whatever.
Yeah.
We need workers.
Yeah.
We have people in areas, especially like you go to Baltimore, the unemployment, we can change that. We need to find a way to get the workers trained and on construction sites. And it has to come from private industry.
Yeah.
From just like what we're talking about. Because if you can figure out a way, like when a contractor goes into Baltimore, yeah, you got to hire this many, look at DC, you got to hire this many. All right, you know what it is? It's a pain. There's no program because it's like, you're going to hire locally. Okay, I got to do it because my contract says I got to do it. It should be different.
Yes.
It can be different. But that's a conversation for another day. I'm glad you brought that up. I walked on a site today.
Mm-hmm.
There are more females, and it's predominantly Hispanic.
Oh yeah, I go to a Spanish tutor, in part because that is the spokesperson or the vocero for Associated General Contractors. Vocero. The news that is most interested in construction stories is typically Univision and Telemundo, because it's their viewers who are building America.
Yes.
And here's the great thing is that construction remains that gateway into the American dream for countless numbers of legal immigrants in this country.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we could spend more time than you'll ever have or we'll ever have for this podcast talking about our flawed immigration policies and the fact that we essentially hold businesses accountable for our failure to enforce our border laws.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Contractors are held responsible because someone shows up with what looks like authentic papers and turns out they're hired an undocumented worker. It's not their job to keep undocumented workers out of the country, but they're the ones who get blamed for it. But ultimately, our members want to see more legal immigrants in the country, and they want to see better border security because they don't want to be held accountable for hiring someone who's undocumented, and they also don't want to have to compete against some unscrupulous firm that's taking advantage of a bunch of undocumented workers by not giving them the benefits they're entitled to. Right, that undermines our responsible members. In terms of the percentage of the craft workforce, one area where we have plenty of diversity is Hispanic, Latino workers, but we need to see more diversity in the ownership ranks, and that will, or in the management ranks, the C-suites, right? And that'll come. Our belief is the more folks you have working in this industry, the more they're going to advance. Because no matter who you talk to on a job site, here's what I hear time and again: if you show up, if you work hard, and if you do your job, you're going to advance in the construction industry. And I've heard that from project supervisors, project managers, and people who own multi-billion-dollar construction firms who started as laborers. And there may be other sectors of the economy are like it, but I'll tell you, in construction, the American dream still exists and thrives every day. This is a segment of the economy where anyone can succeed. You don't even need a college degree. Shucks, that's a great thing. You don't have to come to the industry with debt. You can show up and you can learn a craft. You can have pride in what you do. Now, this is a little digression, but I have 3 children. They're all surly teenagers. I've never taken any of them, even when they were cute, into my office and shown them a press release that I wrote or a workforce development plan that I wrote and said, look how great this is. It's great, but they're not going to appreciate it. I can't tell you, I've never met someone who works in construction who hasn't taken a family member or a friend on a drive around town to show them every project they've worked on. That's my airport. Now, they could have been the laborer on that airport, but that's my airport. That's my bridge. And that's cool.
I said the same thing. And it's about the worker and it's about the person in the office. Be different. Work harder than the next guy. Let's show up every day.
Yeah.
And you're going to move forward because most people really don't care.
Yeah.
So if you want to, that's a great path. And construction offers that. Great point. Where do you see construction generally in 5 years?
Thriving. It's construction. You have to be optimistic, right? It's not. Contractors are optimistic at heart. Where do we go in 5 years? I think that the industry has already in the midst of, and I think the coronavirus has accelerated, sort of the second great wave of adoption of technology. The first one being the adoption of powered construction equipment. Now, the construction industry is becoming increasingly high tech, and not just kind of BIM and sort of we're using tablets and we're sort of doing so much more pre-construction on computers and we're minimizing the amount of time on construction, but cool sci-fi technology stuff. More people in exoskeleton suits, more drones, more robots, more sort of autonomous vehicles or pieces of construction equipment operating around a job site in a way that protects safety. More people wearing technology wearables to keep them safe on job sites. So in 5 years, we're thriving as an industry, we're high tech as an industry, and we're safer as an industry because technology's allowed us to operate in a way that minimizes so many of those risks that are still too common today. And we're probably, by the way, and I know this is going to upset some people, we're all wearing Chimstrat helmets in 5 years.
So to the companies I consult with, that's mandatory. And you know what? Just like in the 80s, I would walk on a high rise in New York City with hard shoes and a suit, tie, no hard hat. It was okay.
Yeah.
And everybody, oh, what do you mean? Safety is going to cost? You have to do it.
That's right.
For the right reasons.
But I tell you one thing I hope doesn't change in the construction industry. And this was one of the first lessons I learned. So back in 2009, I'm new at AGC. We're talking about the stimulus. We do a news conference we're building a new kind of bridge coming into the Columbus airport. They call it Skyport. And the owner of the company shows up because he's going to talk to the media, and he's wearing a suit with his boots. Every person on that job site, including the laborer, looked at him and said, "The hell are you doing? You're going to a funeral?"
Mm-hmm.
And they started. And I was like, "Oh my God, they're just kidding with the owner of the company."
Mm-hmm.
There is a family feel. I don't want to sound naive, but there is a family feel or a level of emotional connection that happens within construction projects. I think because the work is so hard and the project so intense, they are like teams. There's a team spirit in most construction firms, whether they're the largest corporations or the smallest family firms, that makes this industry a good place to work, that makes people feel like they're part of a family in addition to a team. These are my people. I'm one of their people. I hope that doesn't change.
And I agree 100% with you. The companies that have good leadership, just good people at the head, whether they're good, technically or not, but they care about people. As a former owner, I can tell you that is huge. Yeah. Because that family spirit means a lot. It's a very difficult field. It's unsafe at times. You got to count on people to do the right thing, and you count on your workers to do a good job, to build it right and build it safe. So I think that goes a long way. I got to tell you, this has been a pleasure for me to hear the industry from you. From your eyes, and anybody who's listening. I had a couple questions that were answered that you answered. One of my questions was, what real benefits would a general contractor get or a subcontractor? If you listen to this podcast, you'll know exactly what they are. You did a great job of that. I guess, why don't you tell the audience how to get a hold of you or where to find AGC if they want to join?
People can find out more about us at agc.org, agc.org. And then on there, we've got a map of all our chapters. So you can't join AGC of America directly. You have to join through one of our chapters, and that just depends on where you're doing business. But you can find all the information about the chapters and get connected with them, or we'll connect them to you if you just leave your information with us on that website, agc.org.
Awesome. How many members did you say you had?
27,000 firms. And
right,
we're happy to take more.
I can tell you this, you got 27,001 now because I'm going to join.
All right, I earned my lunch.
I want to thank you so much for this interview, your time. It's been super insightful. It'll be, we talk about having good content on our podcast. This is perfect. Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, good. The pressure was high, so I hope I didn't disappoint. Happy to chat. Appreciate it, Dave.
Awesome. And listen, thank you for joining in. We'll see you in another week. Stay safe and stay tuned. All the music for the episodes, including our theme song Elevate, was provided by DMV producer Trey Skills. If you like what you heard, follow Trey Skills on Instagram at Trey Skills, TreySkillz. That's TreySkillz. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Elevate Industry. Check out my YouTube channel at Commercial Construction, Elevate the Industry. Visit my website, adicorp.com, ADICORP.com. Go to LinkedIn, search for David Procida, hit connect, and follow me. Please rate, review, and comment on this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next week.